All right, it's time to have some fun. Thanksgiving's just over. Christmas is on its way. And this is exciting times. So let's take a look at some of the Christmas stories that we get from our songs and our Christmas traditions. This in no wise is going to be a series of devotional talks, but merely just fun ones. Matthew chapter 2 is the only place we see the visit from the wise men of the East. The other gospel writers never mention it. And it doesn't seem to be mentioned, in fact, very much at all for the first, let's say, 100 years after Jesus. But then people picked up on the Matthew story and they began to embellish it. And it continued to be embellished until in 1857 in, Williamsport, Pennsylvania. A man wrote the song, "We Three Kings of Orient Are," and it continues to grow. Well, they're never called kings anywhere in Scripture. And again, we're very limited. It's just Matthew. So we don't know their names. Those names were supplied later in medieval times. So once again, it was just a writer in their imagination. Nothing dastardly or awful, just people imagining. Because this is a pretty cool thing. Here are people that are not Jews, and they've traveled quite a far away. They've seen the star. And so they have come to worship God. Well, there's a lot here. First of all, we need to take a look at the word magi. It comes from magus, the same word that gives us magician, and it does mean wise men. It also could mean scholars and counselors. These men were probably Zoroastrian, which was a religion, comes out of Persia. And they were known for reading the stars, watching the stars. They were astrologists back during a time when astrology was thought of as a science and as something which could be useful. But they were also studying the stars for some reason, and they knew that a special one had come and what that portended. So they went and they worshiped Jesus, but they did not show up the night of his birth. Well, I know in the nativity scenes they do, along with cut out sheep and donkeys and the shepherds. It was a very non-silent night if you follow the nativity scenes, but that's not, no. In fact, they probably arrived a year to 2 years after the birth of Jesus. We get that because they came to the house in which he was staying, and when Herod, who was hunting, he became aware of this, and so he decided to hunt this new king child. He backtracked, figured out how much time they'd spent on the road, and so he went up to 2 years that they had been on this journey. And by the way, the slaughter of the innocents, that has been a big teaching throughout history, really, but we find it nowhere but in Matthew. And so we can always assume it took place because Herod was the kind of guy that would have no problem killing babies all day long. He killed some of his own family without batting an eye. It wasn't going to be a huge massacre, but any loss of a child is horrendous beyond words. But I've seen the paintings where there were just scores of children in a pile, and one child in a pile is horrid enough. Bethlehem was small enough that the slaughter of the innocents, if it took place as Matthew put it, probably would have amounted to 3 or 4 children. And I imagine the tears of their mothers and fathers never ended. But that's a different subject. We're going to try to keep with the wise men today. Why is it that these men are so important to us? Well, I think it's because we hear prophecy being fulfilled, which Matthew was all about. He was all about that Jesus was the promised Messiah, the anointed one of God, the one prophesied to be king of the Jews and king of the entire world. And so he worked a lot more of these prophecies in, and it probably comes from Isaiah 60, verse 6, which says, "The wealth of the nations will come to you. A multitude of camels will cover you. The young camels of Midian and Ephah, all those from Sheba will come. They will bring gold and frankincense and will bear news of the praises of the Lord." And then there are 2 passages in the Psalms as well. Psalm 72:10, the kings. See, that's where these men morph into kings in some of these songs. The kings of Tarshish and of the isles shall pay tribute, and the kings of Arabia and Saba offer gifts. And then Psalm 72:15, and there may be given to him gold from Arabia. And so from all of this develops, well, these must have been the wise men. They must have also been kings. More likely, kings sent them and sent them with gifts. They would have seen the stars, gone to the kings, talked about what they believed it meant. Kings would have given them tribute and they would have gone, but not three. There may have only been three wise men, but they would not have traveled with those kinds of goods across those kinds of deserts with all of the brigands, the robbers, the other tribes, hostile tribesmen. They wouldn't have gone there without a huge company. And so again, these Old Testament passages, all of these camels are coming. Well, the camels, generally, when you're being covered by camels, it means that you're being given gifts and gifts and gifts. The prophecy here can mean a few different things, but certainly it can be fulfilled in Matthew with the coming of these emissaries with a large group to protect them, keep the food going. There were always a lot of things to do to make a journey back then. So you would need a large group, but not too large because you have to be balanced with food supply. It was a tough time to be alive. The gospel, again, never mentions the number of them, and it might surprise you to know that at least half of the Christian world, the Eastern Orthodox half, says that there are 12 magi. And why 12? It's not exact science, but it's thought to be mirroring the 12 tribes of Israel, the 12 apostles. 12 was just a number that they liked back then. And by the way, Psalm 72:11, may all kings fall down before him. So once again, is this then saying these wise men were kings? No, if they fall down before the Christ child and they were sent by kings, that is in effect those kings bowing down. It's the way they use language back then. They are very wise men. They are, as I said, probably Zoroastrian, fascinating religion, still around, but very small, very, very small. They are under constant threat by Muslims. Of course, Christians haven't treated them well either. But one of the main reasons they're small is their marriage rules. They have to marry within the faith. They are not evangelistic. And so the very rules of their faith make them dwindle. It's not as extreme as the Shakers, a religious group in America that decided that all sex was sinful, even that between married people. And so whenever you converted, the men would have to leave the marriage, the women would have to leave the marriage, women go to one set of dorms, men to the other, and never the twain shall meet. The Shakers only lasted for about a generation, and we can see why. All right? Zoroastrianism is not that bad, but it has some real tight rules. All of that just to say, here's one of those wonderful little songs we sing this time of year. Don't the rest of it. And you might have thought it was all about history, or you might have thought it was all about myth, and the truth is, it's kind of both. I hope that your family had a great Thanksgiving time. If you're American, Thanksgiving was just Canadian. They get in there a little bit earlier. And if you and your family are all united and at peace, I pray that it just continues that way and you stay healthy all the way through Christmas. Next week, what about Saint Nicholas? Who is this guy? All right, have a great week.